Abram, how are you? Welcome to the first episode of what I think is going to be a pretty fun and valuable little podcast show that we're going to put together called Return on Intelligence, mate. So I've had a number of people hit me up and have really enjoyed the conversations that we've had. So it's kind of evolved from those conversations and. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I think we're going to provide a lot of value to people. There's a lot of things in this space at the moment that people are sort of getting information left, right, and center. And I think we're going to try and distill all of that and really get down to how we can use AI and Copilot to really enhance people's way they work and also inside of businesses and business operations. So first, what I'd like you to do is give everybody watching and listening a little bit of an insight into who Abram Jackson really is.
Sure. Well, I've been at Microsoft now for 14 years, just about. Right out of college, I started in back-end databases and servers, but I got the privilege to start our internal AI platform. This is back in 2016, right? And so now this
Yeah.
is practically good old-fashioned AI.
Very
And we shipped,
old-fashioned AI.
yeah. So we shipped a lot of those features, and I was still working in that when GPT-3 came out. We
Yeah.
were exploring how to apply GPT-3 to the different places in Microsoft 365. Well, when ChatGPT came out, we jumped on it as Microsoft, very quickly in Bing, but also in Microsoft 365 with the product that we have now of Copilot Chat. So I moved over pretty fast over into Copilot extensibility. How developers can apply this AI to their scenarios, their companies, their own software. And that's really what I've been doing now for several years. From the internal AI platform to Copilot now, right? Is how do we actually apply this AI to individuals to be productive? We've tried lots of things with sort of middling success. The different AI features that we've had in Microsoft 365. Like some of them have been decent, some of them are annoying, more than helpful for a lot of users. Both chat and language models, it's really exploding. Now there's so much, so I'm having the most fun I've ever had working in this space.
It's you're you are in a pretty good position, pretty good space. Now, I guess the idea of what we're doing with this show is just really you and I having a chat about general stuff. So, look, a lot of work I do as well, and I'd be keen on your take on this. Is I'm working with a lot of organisations in that know that they need to be doing something in AI, but not really knowing where to start or what to do or what processes or where we can start to augment that type of stuff with some type of AI to make things easier. And I think a lot of people struggle with that sort of mindset change or the shift in working a little bit differently. We look at Copilot and we look at Copilot Chat, and it's literally a search box, right? So it's almost like the same as Google. So we're used to doing this. Let's ask Google for something, and it's going to give back a response. So it's like that, command response type of thing, where I'd love you to sort of what's your take on how to start changing that type of behavior from a search to a more conversational type of thing.
Yeah, the box looks really similar, but it doesn't operate that similarly. Now, you can do stuff like single turn search kinds of thing with AI, language models, and chat. But that's like a pretty minor value of it. Like it is pretty good at looking up facts, right? And you see Google's AI overviews doing that, and increasingly presenting entire reports like Perplexity does.
Yep.
But it also took people several years to get used to searching the internet. Also, right? We had false starts. We had Yahoo directories of these. These are all of the websites. I remember having a mouse pad. It was a mouse pad that listed, here are all of the websites.
Well,
um, so, but chat really is different. And you do want to think
mm,
about it pretty differently from search engines.
yeah.
It like I said, it can do decently at that, but the real power is in the conversation. What's so awesome about these language models is that they can have conversation with us. Are you a Star Trek or a Star Wars fan?
Star
Anyway,
Wars.
Star Wars. Well, C3PO, less so
Yeah.
R2D2. C3PO can have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
That's why he's so useful. Although he's a
Yeah.
protocol droid, and how many protocols and languages he knows, like you see him all of the time doing all kinds of
Mm,
other stuff, right?
mm,
Because he is artificially intelligent, and you can ask him to do things, and he'll be a little bit salty with you, and get into an argument with Chewbacca. Uh, we're
So
not
is
quite
is
there
the
yet.
is does Copilot? Well, when you're having a conversation with Copilot, is it ever getting angry with you?
Uh, well, Copilot doesn't, but you'd be surprised what you can do with local language models.
Mm,
That we don't fine tune quite so strongly, or when you
yeah.
jailbreak them. Um, they can get pretty salty. Now, in a work context, that's generally not appropriate, and so we kind of force that out of them.
Mm. Hey, I've heard you talk about, and I think we've had this conversation before about, where the power of Copilot is, and I'm sure you come across this question all the time, and you see it everywhere, and I get asked it all the time as well. Is ChatGPT is giving us better results, or the responses we're getting from ChatGPT are way better. Um, how do you sort of explain that? I mean, what's your response to that generally?
It's really interesting looking at all of the different AI providers, solution spaces, and what they're going after, and what scenarios they're trying to do. The difference between Character.ai and Perplexity is really extreme.
Yeah.
Character.ai is actually much better at having a conversation and building a relationship with the user than
Mm,
ChatGPT is, because that's its goal, right? It wants to be your friend or your girlfriend, and it's very good at that. While something like Perplexity is really good at producing a report, of grounded information from the internet. Now, Microsoft 365 Copilot, like we are super focused on work, work scenarios, right? Drafting your email and reviewing your Word documents and, all of these things that we do, on our computers at work. And, I think it is actually extremely good at that. Now, it may not be as good at having the conversation, of like friendly conversation that we use in our personal lives. Like, of course, I use ChatGPT as well as
mm,
Copilot Consumer and a bunch of these other products, and like it's a different use case. And yeah,
yeah.
those are more fun to talk with, but they're not as useful for my
Yeah.
work.
And I think that's the key, that work context. I mean, you're using Copilot to be Microsoft 365 Copilot to be more productive at work. So things like referencing documents, or all of your emails and Teams chats, and in a work context where you're not doing that in a personal. It's not being your tourist guide, or putting together meal plans, or well, Copilot can, but
Yeah.
it's different context, right?
Well, yeah, I encourage anybody to use multiple of these AI
Mm.
products. I try asking ChatGPT to summarize your most recent emails from your manager or what is the most
Yeah,
critical.
yeah,
Like,
that's
of
right.
course it doesn't do that. Like,
No,
that's
that's
not
right.
its job.
Yeah,
Maybe it's better at a math problem, perhaps.
yeah.
I haven't done that analysis. So I think anybody, they
Mm.
should have multiple of these things for their personal lives and for their work lives.
How are you,
Depending
how are you
on
finding?
what kind of work they're doing.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're testing out these different models as well. But how are you finding the deep research? I'm using the deep research, finding that extremely fascinating on what the responses are with that.
Yeah. Well, so GitHub, I'm going to answer with a little bit differently. GitHub
Right.
Copilot was like the first scenario that people really saw as
Mm,
incredible value for some domain. But only software engineers saw it because
mm,
it's only for programming. It's only for software engineering.
yeah.
And while ChatGPT has whatever 100 million active users or whatever the numbers are, a lot like people use it for fun.
Mm,
What deep research did, from especially from OpenAI and their version of deep research, really showed so many more professionals an extremely valuable scenario without a lot of work. Like you could get huge value out of ChatGPT, but it did require a lot of work, a lot of
yeah.
knowledge, prompt engineering, long conversations, deep understanding, hours of training and practice. But with deep research, so many, college professors to marketers to anybody else, right, with just a couple of minutes, now have the kind of that software engineering moment of an extremely valuable scenario. They're like, oh, wait, this thing that they haven't spent any time learning to use is going to immediately help them. So deep research is, yeah, an awesome innovation. Now, of course, you see it from Google, from Perplexity, and undoubtedly others.
I know it's. I mean, I was testing out the different models the other week, just in terms of building out. I'm building out a couple of productized services, right? So what I was trying to do was use that as a partner.
Mhm.
And do some research about market analysis, USP, and then put together a whole framework and a playbook to create this service, but also then how to a 3-year plan to get to certain goals. And it took, look, it does take longer, obviously. So it took about 7 or 8 minutes to actually go out and do its research and come back. But the level of granularity and detail it had was unbelievable.
Yeah. It's
Mm.
it can get not just dozens, right, but more than 100 different citations and sources. Uh,
But you watch it go through, and you see it shows you how, yeah, shows how what it's doing, what it's researching, and then shows you step
mhm.
by step. It's fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah, in some ways it works a lot like a human researcher. And
yeah,
other decisions that it makes are totally alien, in the way that it
yes,
operates and goes
yeah,
about these things. But
yeah.
yeah, very fascinating.
Yeah. Now, what about okay? Let's change a little bit, tact a little bit here, and talk about prompting a bit. Prompt engineering was the buzzword of probably last year and the year before. There was going to be job roles, and your role is now a prompt engineer and all that sort of stuff. How? And we're going to get on. I want to chat to you about agents in a sec, but because you're the man with 50 agents that doesn't do any work and just sits there and's got these little agents doing his work for you. But how important do you think learning how to prompt is from the outset before we even talk about agents? Is it important, do you think, to learn how to prompt when you're starting out with Copilot? Well, specifically Copilot.
It's been interesting seeing this evolve.
Mm,
The space of prompt engineering. One of the there's a parallel thing going on in generative AI of image generation. And the way that you used to prompt image generators, like like Stable Diffusion, was keywords and tags, because that was what was in its training data. There's a lot of keywords and tags on images found on image boards online. But the more recent models, like Flux, are now much more. It's descriptive, right? It's almost like you write a mini novel, like
yeah.
you're an author and you're writing the scene of exactly what it's going to look
Yeah.
like, and say, instead of doing all of the tags. And so it's really transitioned. Now, writing a novel scene is also difficult.
Mm,
Uh, I'm not very good at it. I got decent at doing the tags style. It's kind of a parallel here in prompt engineering. But writing the novel scene is actually uh, trickier for me. In terms of the language models, there's been a similar kind of transition happening. So early on, at the earliest, if you're using GPT-3, not even 3.5, like it was, you had to be pretty intentional. Like, and using 3.5 and some of that era models, right? It would only work if you prompt engineered. And I don't mean typing into the chat box. I mean typing out the user prompt, and then the assistant prompt, and then the user prompt, and then the assistant prompt, and then your actual user prompt, right?
Yeah.
Because it would only work if you gave it at least 2 examples very consistently. And we've seen that move and become easier, in the intervening years. It hasn't been that long. Maybe I shouldn't say years, because it's moving so quickly.
It is.
I'm not going to say prompt engineering is dead, but I don't think it's the future, at least for most workers. I think, software engineers, right, when they are, creating something that's going to run, 60,000 times, every single day, whatever, right? That's when it turns into not just like carefully typing out descriptive things, but like software engineering version. Like you check the prompt into your source control and you run evaluation suites on it. But now for regular users, and the way that these models are trained and the way that they work now, they work so well through conversation. They've been fine-tuned differently now. And so they don't need the equivalent of a bunch of image board tags. So I don't think so.
Yeah. I know it's interesting. Actually, I was listening to CJ Tan on the Intrazone podcast this morning, actually, before here. And what he was talking about was, which I've never used before, was Windows H on your Windows machine, where you got voice to text, right? So I was using that this morning and just speaking into Copilot, right? Into M365 Copilot chat. So that you got your cursor in the text box, you've got, and then you talk and you use your voice, and then it puts the text into the prompt. And it seems, rather than typing out, you're actually talking. And I found, just by using that initially this morning, I'm going to use that for a bit now and see how it goes. But you just speak naturally and you speak fluently and that type of thing, rather than thinking about what you're actually typing. You're just talking. I think that could be a good, a good way to actually have a conversation. It was interesting.
There's a great use case for that. Either with Windows dictation or whatever dictation software you're using, or OpenAI just released a new one this morning, is just stream of consciousness, right? Like you've got a product idea or a project idea or something like that, and it's work and it's a skill, right? And it takes a lot of time to go produce the 6-pager or the PRFAQ or whatever system you're using for this thing.
Yeah.
But stream of consciousness, like if you've been thinking about it for a while, it's been bouncing around in your head, you can turn on dictation and just talk for 5 or 10 minutes out of order. Say, go back to that thing, whatever. Don't worry about what's actually being typed. And also don't worry about small transcription errors. And then ask the language model to match some other format. Take all of your stream of consciousness and boom, produce a decent draft. Now, if it's going to be a serious document, it's probably not going to be perfect. But for 5 minutes of just talking, that wasn't like any particular new skill about creating stuff. So that is a really fun thing to do.
Yeah, but I think I reckon it's going to get better results for you. I mean, it's going to feel more natural as opposed to sitting at a keyboard and typing. I think the sort of that voice is going to is going to be interesting.
We see that it becoming even more natural. Obviously, there's advanced voice mode from OpenAI. I use a lot of Copilot consumer voice mode, and I really like it. I've actually started listening to less podcasts. Maybe I shouldn't say that on a podcast.
You can't say that. We're recording one
right now. Stop listening to this podcast and open up Copilot voice and just ask a question about a topic that you're interested in. And it's gonna, and then interrupt it and ask more details. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, I know we were keeping these short, but I do want to chat to you a little bit about agents. So you're the agent man, or 007, as I tend to introduce you. If I'm talking, and I spoke to you before we started recording this, I'll use you as an example when I'm talking to certain people as well. And I do call you 007 because you do have around about, I don't know, you might have culled a few agents because they're not performing, but you've got around 40 odd. Tell me about agents. For everybody listening, let's just give a helicopter view of explanation of what agents are.
Yeah. And I'm going to make several more tomorrow, by the way.
Of course
So
you are.
there's really two very different definitions of agents. You go ask the internet, including AI, what an AI agent is, and it'll give you a technical definition. That technical definition will be some version of, it's a language model with a tool that it can interact with something else. It can also observe the results of that tool and then make a decision about whether to continue, right? And so I shorten that whole thing to LLM plus tool plus loop. And most of the technical definitions that you'll find are some version of that. If you go look it up on Wikipedia, it'll talk about a thermostat, which is a simple version of that if you had a language model, I guess.
Yeah.
But when the rest of us talk about agents, we think about humans, like the agents that we have or that we hire, a real estate agent or a financial agent. We always hear about the Hollywood talent agents. I don't have one yet. Maybe this podcast takes off.
You're going global. I did tell you this before. You're going global, man. You're on LinkedIn's blowing up because of your content. So anyway, sorry, keep going.
What everybody wants from their AI is a specialist that can handle some set or domain of work. That's really what they want, right? And it's that human definition of, that real estate agent. It understands you very deeply. It understands your preferences, where you want to live, if you want a yard, how large, and it knows much more about real estate than you do. Right? What properties are coming on the market, what the HOA dues are, what the reputation of the neighborhood is, whatever. And then once you have a real estate agent, you say, please help me find a house. They take all of your preferences and all of their knowledge, and then they go act, right? They're proactive and they're working on your behalf. And then they don't purchase the house.
Yet.
They show it to you, and they are helping you. And then you decide to purchase it or not. If you don't, then they learn more of your preferences. So that's really what people want from their agents. And that's why we call them Copilot agents, while they are also the technical definition. Like, really what we're trying to do is create those specialists to offload your menial or complicated or just work that AI can do super well. That's what we're trying to achieve with this. It's what the technologists are trying to achieve generally too. They just talk about it in different terms.
Yeah. And I mean, for you specifically, or what I'm finding is that a lot of people and companies in general are trying to think about these agents as one massively big agent that can do lots of different things, right? But we're probably better off, and again, I think you're on the same wavelength here, is having having function or task specific agents that are responsible for a specific task in a process. So if we've got a 10-step process, we might have 7 or 8 agents that are called upon to actually complete that process one after the other type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is the technology works better that way, generally. The AI that we have now, they work pretty well when they're very specifically focused. I mean, fairly specifically focused. They're still a lot broader than what we had before. The other reason that it works well to have multiple agents is they can be used in different orders and in different contexts. So if you have a 10-step business process and it has been the same for 17 years, you probably already talked to UiPath and you probably already automated it. What agents allow you to do is use them in a different order or in different contexts or slightly differently or by modification. So they allow for this flexibility.
Yeah.
And when you do that per step, that flexibility gets super powerful so that when you connect them together, they can accomplish a much broader set of things than if you
Mm.
tried to just rigorously specify a business process, in some workflow instructions.
So when you say connect them together, you're meaning you sort of app mentioning them, bringing them into the chat experience. Is that what you're meaning by that?
Yep. That's what we do in Microsoft 365 Copilot. We're very
Yeah.
intentional about setting it up that way,
Yeah.
where um, we know that with the current technology level of AI, as well as for the flexibility, it's extremely helpful to have the user in the loop, what we call human in the loop or HITL. Before any major decisions happen, and also before the AI gets too far off down on the wrong path. And so I almost exclusively use at mentioning of agents inside one conversation that is the broader project that I'm doing.
Yeah.
We've got the focused view there as well, which can be very helpful for learning how to use the agent. But beyond that, I try to use at mentioning, and I string them together in one conversation.
Yeah. Interesting. Before we leave,
Sure.
give me one example. I'm going to put you on the spot here. One example of a process that you do that you use multiple agents with.
Um, okay, so let's talk about writing like a strategy paper.
Good
Um,
example.
yeah, so I maybe I don't get to do this as often as I would like to, but when writing a strategy paper, there's a lot that goes up front, like in the research and in the collecting information. And so having agents, in Microsoft 365 Copilot, right, we've got agents, that are very easy to specify to like SharePoint sites and collections and documents. And so it's, I can take, our, a SharePoint folder of our previous strategy documents, or more likely other teams' strategy documents. And I can research and understand and even ask questions about what other teams are doing without reading, 17 all super dense 6-pagers. That can use that to start creating the outline. I probably am going to fill in a lot of it, writing it myself, but then I can start using my agents that are giving me feedback. And I use multiple agents for this. I wrote one agent that I call Brutal Feedback, which is instructed to just absolutely rip it to shreds.
Right.
And sometimes I need to use like a lesser agent on that, so I don't feel
Yeah.
so bad about what I've written.
Yeah.
But it can work really well for like grammar and like sentence clarity as another
Yeah.
frequent kind of agent that I use as steps in this process. And if you use it all in the same conversation, like it knows the context, you don't have to bring the context back in every time. It's also aware of the changes that you're already making as you do it through conversation.
That's a really important thing to explain and for people to understand is that I love your analogy of treating a chat as a project, because you bring these agents in, you app mention them, and it understands the context of that whole thing, which I think is super powerful. Yeah, unreal. Hey, we're going to leave it there.
All right.
That was fun. That was good. It was good chat.
This was
Good
yeah.
first episode. It was. And don't listen to what he said about not listening to podcasts as much anymore and going to Copilot. You have to listen to this one. So that was good. And we'll be back again. Thanks, mate. That was good fun.
Great talking to you, Daniel. Yeah.